just gone through Ezra. We follow that up with going through the book of Nehemiah. And what's special about that and why it connects so well with the book of Esther is that was, okay, the book of Esther is the last historical account, Old Testament account that was written. This is it. In fact, chances are the book of Esther was the very last book written, canon-wise, before the coming of Christ. So that's kind of the time frame of it. The historical books we've just looked at were the nation of Israel coming out of captivity, given the opportunity to return to the promised land, right? But not very many of them did that. And so what Esther does, the book of Esther, is it gives us an opportunity to look into the lives of those who did not return. What were they up to? They're, living under the Medo-Persian Empire. And by the way, why did they stay there anyway? And so really there's a number of reasons that could have caused them to stay where they were. And I think that as I look at it, I think perhaps one of the primary reasons they stayed where they were staying is that God says, even though I'm going to take you into captivity, I want you to know that even while you're being punished, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you even while I'm punishing you and taking you out of the land that I promised to you. And so where we were looking at the rebuilding of the temple, the rebuilding of the wall of Nehemiah, we were looking at the Word of God coming to a place of prominence with God's people. We were looking at the people rededicating their lives to God. And all through the place, we were seeing how God reveals himself and how he works in the lives of people. It's very, very clear. Ezra, Nehemiah, boy, they were on the Word. We were watching how the enemy attacks and how God gives leaders to set up and protect the people. Oh, man, it was very clear. Now, here's the thing. Right in the middle of the book of Ezra is when the events of Esther take place. And this book, though, is much different than other books in the Bible because it's interesting that we take note that no place in the book of Esther is the name of God even mentioned. So we can't even say that, well, there's really sound doctrine that you give. Well, there's no really speaking of doctrine. Well, it's prayer then. No, there's no really speaking of prayer. There's not really teaching. You're like, well, what's going on with this? Why is it in here? Well, it's in here because the Holy Spirit wants us to see it. Now, who wrote this book? Well, there's a couple of good ideas. Nobody really knows who the author was other than the Holy Spirit. But a lot of people think that it might have been Mordecai, who's Esther's uncle. Maybe he wrote it. Some people think that Nehemiah wrote it. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of tend towards thinking it was Nehemiah writing it in Jerusalem. But that's just my thought. We don't really know exactly who it is that wrote it. But there's a couple of reasons why I think that. And I'll share those with you right now. I don't think Mordecai wrote it because there's a verse in here where it talks about Mordecai and what a good guy he is. And so I don't think Mordecai wrote it because, you're not going to write something like that, Let me tell you how good I am. But you can talk about somebody else. You can say, well, their goodness, And I also don't think that it was somebody that was in Persia or in the exiled area because they wouldn't have wanted to be writing about a Persian king, because the Persian king would say, what are you writing about me? And it would have to be very politically correct. So there's a freedom in here in the writing. And so I kind of think that it was somebody that had already left. And who else but Nehemiah, who just wrote the book of Nehemiah that we read and definitely understands how things work. So that's just my thinking on it. But at either way, it is God who wrote this book. Now, what do we find out from a story? And I never like to use the word story when I talk about the Bible. I know a lot of people do, but I don't. It's an account. This is a factual account. So it's not like a story, like a fairy tale kind of thing. This is an account. So why would, or what do we gain from reading through a story, an account that reads like a novel, that doesn't mention God, that is really not into doctrine, because, well, how people ask that question, they say, if a tree falls in the forest, And nobody's there to hear it. Does it really make a sound, right?
I thought it was, is the man still wrong?
And the answer is yes. But that's okay. But the question then that kind of relates with that is God still working when nobody sees him? Now, we all say yep right away because we know and love the Lord, but there aren't those times when you think, Lord, where are you? And why is this happening? And how come that person's getting away with this? And why are we here and not there, or there and not here? And how come, right? This is a book that lets us know about God's providence, that God is in every detail, that he's working behind the scenes. And what I find fascinating about this book is that God is working out his will and his sovereign providence without crossing the line of somebody's free will. These people aren't being made to say and do what they're doing. They have free will to do and make their own decisions, but God in his foreknowledge and in his sovereignty is working all things together for what? For us. For the good. Now, is it tough sometimes? We have to hang on sometimes when we don't see it and we don't know. And there are things that are going to happen to our lives that don't make any sense. And the order of it's not going to make any sense. But I'll tell you what, you could say it doesn't make any sense right now. But God will reveal it to us. And if not here and now, then when we're in the kingdom with Christ, we will know even as we're known. And I think that the biggest word that you're going to hear when we all get to heaven, guess what word I think it is when we all get to heaven? I think the word that we're going to hear whispered and spoken all throughout Christ's kingdom by his believers, the sentence that's going to be said is, oh, now I get it. That's what we're going to say. But until that point, we walk by faith and we trust the Lord and we put our faith in him. Because what's the alternative? Are we going to put our faith in men's words? Or, oh my gosh, no, please don't do that. Or even in your own self. So God is always working supernaturally, naturally. Esther chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. Now, if you've had any geographic, training, if you've Googled Earth at all, this is a lot of land. This is 120. Now, when it says provinces, you can say like 127 nations. He ruled over them. This one guy, Xerxes. That includes the Jews and the Promised Land. He's ruling over all of it. He's large and in charge. And he reigns from this time period, 486 to 465 BC. And let me kind of give you the order of things. It goes King Cyrus, followed by Darius, followed by Ahasuerus, the one that's mentioned here, who's also known as Xerxes, followed by Artaxerxes Longimanus, who is the son of this Xerxes, who is the one who gave approval for Nehemiah to go back to the Promised Land. So you can see where we're all fit together here. Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about Xerxes, because there's a lot written about Xerxes. As a matter of fact, has anybody here seen the movie 300? I'm not recommending it, I'm just saying. Have you seen the movie 300? No. Okay. The fight between the Persians and the, who were those guys? They weren't Trojans, Spartans. The Greeks. What had happened was Xerxes' father, Darius, had lost in a battle to the Greeks. But Xerxes maintained control over the land that he did, and he wants to get back at the Greeks in the worst way possible. That's all he can think about, is getting those Greeks. So in that movie, Xerxes actually shows up in that movie 300. He's that tall, strong, scary guy. Well, history writes a lot about Xerxes. You can hear a lot about these fellows that we're talking about in extra biblical writings and in history classes. Xerxes is tall, he's strong, he's good looking, he's proud, he's extremely wealthy, he is the most feared man in the empire, and he is hot-tempered. And he's the Persian king. That's who this guy is, just to give you a feel for it. I don't know that I necessarily, after doing a little bit of study on Xerxes, there's a number of movies out on Esther, aren't they? As a matter of fact, when we're done with the book of Esther, we're actually going to spend a night, we're going to watch the movie, one of the movies that we're going to pick out. And I wanted to do the book before the movie, so that you can pick out the parts that don't match, which is what I always do. Occupational hazard of Bible students, isn't it, you know? It's like, that didn't happen that way anyway. But they make this Xerxes a little bit nicer in the movie than I would make him, because that's not historically what it says about him. But anyway, verse 2, in those days when King Ahasuerus and Xerxes, same guy, sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the citadel. Let me tell you a little bit about Shushan. It was the winter palace. And so if you're a king and you're that wealthy, you have a number of palaces, and this is a warm area that Shushan is located in Persia, Iran. It was a warmer area. And so you would go there in the winter. It was said that you couldn't stay there in the summer, because in Shushan in the summer, they said at that time, if a snake tries to cross the road, he'll never make it. He'll die of heat. So a very hot place. But in the winter, it's really nice. That in the 3rd year of his reign, so we know exactly when this is. This is 483 BC. So in 483 BC, King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, makes a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. So he calls everybody, all the leaders of all his 127 provinces, everybody's going to come to this feast. It's thought that a lot of them didn't come all at once, that they were maybe brought in groups, you know. But he's going to meet with every single of the leaders of his. Now, why is he doing this? Because he is mustering up an army to go to war with the Greeks. That is all that's on his mind. And by the way, will he defeat the Greeks? No. And how do we know that he won't defeat the Greeks? Because Daniel told us in the book of Daniel, before any of this happens, that it's going to go Nebuchadnezzar to the Babylonians, to the Medo-Persians, to the Romans, right? Oh, to the Greeks, to the Romans, and then somehow it's going to come back again to some kind of a revived Roman Empire. But so we know ahead of time already what's going to happen. So indeed, he did lose to the Greeks, just as Daniel had foretold. Verse 4, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is a 6-month show-off. That's what this is. He's showing how, and these guys were not just a little rich. They were like mega rich, and we're going to see in just a moment. I'll be able to point out to how rich these guys were. But these guys are super rich, and he's showing off everything that he has and his power and his might and displays of, look, if I was going to show you everything I have, well, it would take about 3 minutes. But this guy showing off everything that he had, it takes 6 months of feasting. Now, his grandfather, another very famous king by the name of Cyrus, let me tell you a little bit about Cyrus. Every day at Cyrus's table, there were 15,000 nobles. Every day. And here's how he fed them. Every day, 400 sheep, 100 oxen, 30 horses, 30 deer, 400 geese, 300 pigeons, 600 small fowl, 3,750 gallons of wine, 75 gallons of milk, 22,000 loaves of bread, and a partridge in a pear tree. That was every day. Now, the idea of him doing this big show off is for everybody to say, man, you are something. This is great. We have a great kingdom, and we have a great king, and we have something worth fighting for. Man, oh man, we're going to go to war with, get those Greeks, you know. This whole thing is a big charge-up thing. But I think about this king, and I think about if we were able to go to that party of his, we would be staggered at the riches of this king. But what about our king? We should be staggered at the riches of our king, and of the greatness of our king, and of his love, and of his goodness, and of his mercy. And if we could just get a grasp or a glimpse of the greatness of our king, we would be saying like these people, wow, what a king we have. What a kingdom we have. We need to fight alongside this great king of ours, King Jesus. And like we sing that song, Majesty. Boy, I tell you, really picture that when you sing it. No reason why not. Because it took him 6 months to show off his kingdom. How long is it going to take God to show off his kingdom to his kids? Eternity. We're also given another clue about eternity. It says, in the eons to come. In other words, this story, I use that word story, that we're going through is showing to us the great love and the grace of God, isn't it? When you view history for what it is, which is a love story, and the Father pulling out a bride out of this world, and Jesus having to purchase the whole earth in order to get that one bride, shows to us and reveals to us the great love of the Father. And oh, how he loves us. We even sang that tonight. But this is just one little piece. What's the next one going to be like? The Lord's going to say, now look at this about me. And then the Lord's going to say, now look at this about me. Won't that be wonderful? Oh my goodness, what a great king we have. Verse 5. And when these days were completed, so the 6 months is over, the king made another feast, lasting 7 days. Now look who he brings. For all the people who were present in Shushan in the citadel, from the great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Now, I have a sense here that this tag on 7 days at the end of the 6 months is kind of a celebration that everything went so well in the 6 months that yes, we were together, we're going, we have this kingdom, and we're going to fight those Greeks. And now, all you people here in the city, now that everybody's gone home, you people that are in the city, let's get together and let's just celebrate. We can relax now, let our hair down, and just have a wonderful feast together. And you served these people so well, and we pulled it off, and God's with us. And I think it's that kind of a party that they're having. It also says that in the court of the gardens of the king's palace, there's been some excavation and some archaeological digs there, and they have found in this place that there are trees and there is flora from all over the world that don't belong there. And so the thought is that the Medo-Persians who took over the Babylonians, and the Babylonians were famous for the hanging gardens, that they then did that to all their palaces. So we're looking at this spectacular garden party. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen. Can you just picture that? Hot, warm summer weather, hot breeze. You're walking into this spectacular garden with hanging gardens and trees from all varieties. You see these linens flapping in the breeze, purple on silver rods, marble pillars. And the couches were of gold and silver on mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. Now, when it says gold, couches were of gold and silver, they were literally couches. Like, picture a couch that you have at home, only made out of solid gold, and then with pillows on it. And that's what you sat on. Wouldn't that be something? Now, here's what's interesting. When the Greeks defeated the Medo-Persians, the Greeks came in and they saw all this gold and the gold couches. And of course, they carried it all away. But they were like, what a waste, they said. What a waste of riches of these Persians. You know, just throwing money around like that. Look what else. And they served drinks in golden vessels. Check this out. Each vessel being different in form, different from the others. Now, I read that and I thought to myself, hey, that's our house. We don't have a magic cup with a whole we have pretty much early miscellaneous, you know. But that's not what this is talking about. Here's what the Medo-Persians were famous for. They were famous for making golden goblets, and then like a present you would give to a prince or one of the leaders, you would give them this golden goblet that you had made, and they would pour the wine in it, and they would drink from this golden goblet, a tribute to them. And when they were through with it, they would return it to you for you to melt it down, because you were the only one that drank out of that. And it was special to you, and there was no duplicate to it. Isn't that interesting? Now, here's an interesting one for you. This is a little teaser for this coming Sunday. This coming Sunday, we're going to talk about vessels in a great house. And that all the vessels, speaking of us, each one is different. And God has picked and uses each person, the vessel, in his great kingdom in a different way. That's your little teaser for this coming Sunday. Okay, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance according to the generosity of the king. Today we call that, or not we, well, maybe we used to. We call that the open bar with all you can drink. That's what that's talking about. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory. Let me explain that to you, why drinking would be compulsory. What that means is the custom of the day was if the king took a drink, everybody took a drink. That was the compulsory of it. But the king says, no, you don't have to do that. If you drink as much as you want, you can get ahead of me in the count if you want. Or you don't have to drink at all. For so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. The historical writers in regards to this account tell us that by the end of the seventh day, these people are drunk. Everybody is just, you know, back in the day they called it 3 sheets to the wind. I don't know, is that a nautical term, Mike? Yeah, it is. Okay. In fact, they further write that the Persians only settled matters when everybody was drunk. So if the king gets together with all of his leaders and they're not drunk, they say, well, let's not make any decisions yet. Let's drink a little bit more. And But I find this interesting that's how the leaders made decisions. And by the way, did you know that in the United States, the highest per capita consumption of alcohol in the United States is in Washington, D.C.? I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there, you know? Let me share something else with you. There's also a really bad trend going on. There's a couple of bad trends going on right now. But here's one of them. There's a bad trend going around inside the church. And it's particularly by, that I would say that it's sad and dangerous. And it's by young pastors. And there's a couple of things that young pastors are doing right now because they want to be cool and they want to be socially relevant. And that is, they're drinking and they're cussing from the pulpit. You know, they're not drinking at the pulpit, but you know what I mean? They're saying that shows that they're cool and they're connected. And I think that is highly dangerous. I certainly would not want to be known for that. And, you know, they need to watch out for that. Verse 9, Queen Vashti. Now here's Vashti is mentioned. So we're going to have some people show up in this book, and I want you to keep track of these people that I'm going to mention because they're the main characters in the play. Or you can go to the Messianic Temple on Saturday, and you can see all of the people that are in the play. In fact, you can even dress up like that if you want when you go. Isn't that right? Yeah, you can dress up like one of the characters. You can dress up like Vashti, and Vashti here is married to King Xerxes. And by the way, that's not real. The name Vashti denotes beauty or one of a kind or, you know, rare beauty. But it's kind of thought that name Vashti may not have been her actual name. It may have been like a nickname for her, you know. Only the king called her that. So Queen Vashti here comes on the scene. She's married to Ahasuerus or Artaxerxes. And then there's Esther. And her real name, her Jewish name is Hadassah. And her Persian name is Esther. And so, you know, call her whatever you want. But that's the same person. So that person, you'll see that one. You'll also hear Mordecai, and that's her uncle. He's going to be another, he gives her really wise counsel. There's going to be another guy, a bad guy by the name of Haman. And yeah, he's bad. He's a politician, and he's very cunning, and but we'll see him. So those are some of the players. So Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belongs to King Ahasuerus. So the guys are getting plastered, and the women with Vashti are having their own party, you know. And on the seventh day, so this is the last day of this feast, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, what does that mean? He was drunk. He commanded, look at that first guy, me, human. Isn't that what that says? And then Biztha and Harbona and Bigtha and Begatha and Zethar and Carcass. Oh my gosh, he was really loaded there. 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of a King Ahasuerus. Now let me talk about these 7 eunuchs and the guys that are mentioned here. These are the king's counselors. He's got more than just these as his counselors, and we're going to hear their names mentioned as well. But these eunuchs that are in the presence of the king, I want you to think of them in regards that the way they thought of them at that time. These are men who are wise. These are men who are learned, who are educated, who carry a lot of respect there in the king's palace. They're generally not Persians, although sure some of them were. But generally speaking, when they would conquer another kingdom, they would find out who's the best of the best here, and they would take that person, and if they fit into the kingdom there, they would make them a eunuch within the kingdom of that king. Now, why were they eunuchs? The idea behind that was so that nobody would mess with the king's wife, and not only that, but that it would eliminate that person thinking that they want to have some kind of a coup and take over the kingdom, because they wouldn't have any descendants anyway. So it would lessen that possibility. So that's the way they operated at that time. So these guys are trusted, honored men. That's how they were looked at. Verse 11. So the king grabs these 7 guys. This is interesting. How many men does it take to get Vashti's attention? Because he gets these 7 guys and he says to them, "Bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold." Now, the first thing I want to tell you here is that if the Word of God says that a woman is beautiful, guess what? She must have been beautiful to behold. And imagine if you were Vashti, though. And, the women here, I mean, imagine that. The drunken thing that's taking place next door. You're having a sweet little time with your ladies here, drinking tea and eating crackers or whatever you do. And and 7 drunk guys come in and they say, "Get your crown on. The king wants to see you and show you off to everybody." Well, how would you like that? Dress up. Verse 12. But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. All right. Nobody says no to King Xerxes. That's what you have to know right off the bat. You just do not do that, especially at his victory party over this great 6-month display of his wealth and how great he is. And he already thought he was pretty great anyway. And then he calls for his wife, and then she says, "No dice, I'm not going over there." And she says, here's what I'm thinking. You ladies can correct me on this if I'm wrong on this. But I'm thinking, this guy's trying to treat me like I'm a piece of property. Yeah? Like a trophy wife. And she's like, that ain't going to happen. She has her own self-respect within herself that she's not. Vashti is a strong woman. And she says no to these drunken men. And I say good for her. Good for Vashti. And our girls in our church, especially in this culture, need to learn to say no to drunken men. And everybody said, Amen to that. Just say no. That's what we've got to teach our gals here. I would say that this no, though, this is the no that changed history. Because as I read this account, guys, this is like the whistle commencing a game, This is the kickoff. Boom, no. And this sets everything in motion. This one no sets everything in motion and changes history. If she would not have said no, no Esther, maybe no Jews alive under Persian rule at that time, huh? I mean, this a lot of things hinge on this. And I believe that our no's are extremely important. And there is a lot of, we have a lot of pressures on us to say yes to things that the Word of God tells us to say no to. And we need to grow some spiritual muscles and be able to have the kind of integrity. I really like Vashti. She has that internal integrity and that compass that says, no, I'm not going to, that's not right, that's not good, and I'm standing up here for something that's right. And we need to be able to do that. Esther's no pushover either, is what we're going to see. But it seems to me like at that moment, Esther, well, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Vashti just goes for it. Now the king's furious, but I just wanted to share with you a couple things here. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1 says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. I think one translation says is a fool. Solomon further wrote in Proverbs 23, starting in verse 29, who has anguish? Who has sorrow? Who is always fighting? Who is always complaining? Who is unnecessarily bruised? Who has bloodshot eyes? It is the one who spends long hours in the taverns, trying out new drinks. Don't gaze at the wine, seeing how red it is, how it sparkles in the cup. Well, I mean, you can picture this, can't you? You know, it's like mesmerizing, huh? You know, how smoothly it goes down. For in the end, it bites like a poisonous snake. It stings like a viper. You will see hallucinations. You will say crazy things. You will stagger like a sailor tossed at sea, clinging to a swaying mast. And you will say, they hit me, but I didn't feel it. I didn't even know it when they beat me up. When will I wake up so I can go for another drink? You know, let me give you, for us, let me give you one really great reason for believers and people in ministry and in the church not to drink. A really great reason. Because you might cause somebody else to stumble. That's it. Isn't that enough? You know, I think in America there's 15 million alcoholics. 15 million. And did you know that it's like 50-something percent. It's like 52 or 58% of all teen deaths from car accidents are related to alcohol. Better than 50% of all the teens that die in a motor vehicle accident are on account of alcohol. How's that for just two real easy good reasons not to, you know? Let me give you one more. Proverbs 31. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. See, we're princes and princesses of our great king. And it's just not for us. It's just not, you know? Verse 13. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the time. Let me say one more thing about alcohol. The Bible does not say you can't drink, right? It doesn't say that. And there are people who just argue back and forth over this whole thing. But, you know, Mike and I have discussed this a couple of times. I've heard Mike to talk to people before, and that's what we've come down to. Why on earth would you cause somebody to stumble? I know there's people that are in our congregation that struggle with alcohol. Can you imagine if they saw the pastor ordering a beer? I'll take what you got on tap. And you could encourage somebody to fall, and we know the destruction of that person's life, you know? So it's just not worth it. Look, Jesus said, somebody said, oh, well, Jesus drank wine. Yeah, but what was the last thing he said about drinking wine? Nope. He said, I will not drink this cup again till I drink it anew in the kingdom. So why don't we just wait for Jesus to hand us a cup of wine? Do you drink wine? No, but I'm gonna. I'm in no hurry. I can wait. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times. When it talks about wise men that understood the time, chances are it's speaking about people that are into astrology and soothsaying and all that kind of stuff. So the king said to his wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being, now these are the guys, now when it says people who are closest to the kings, and this is going to become very important a little bit later, so this is why I want you to know this. These are guys that are about to be mentioned that are going to help the king make this decision, who did not have to get permission to walk into the king's presence. They could just walk in and out of the throne room anytime. Hi, king, how's it going? Just thought I'd drop by and let you know about this going on or that, the other. Great. Also, if anybody else, so if you're not one of these men that's listed, anybody else who wants to see the king, like I'd like to see the king, you've got to get these guys permission. These guys have got to approve it. Then they've got to go into the king and say, hey, so-and-so wants to see you. Is it okay if I bring them in? And if you went in there without these guys' permission and without the king's permission, what would happen to you? So that's why it mentions it this way. Those closest to him being Karshanah, Shethar, Admatha. Okay, that person's good at math. Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence, who ranked highest among the kingdom. Okay, so picture this. So the king's wasted, all of his people are plastered, and he says, hey, go get Vashti, man. Wait till you see this thing I married, man. She is something. Have her put on her crown and royal robes and bring her. We're going to check her out. She is really. So they go, the 7 eunuchs. She says, I refuse to go. And of course, all the ladies around her are going, right on, sister. You don't have to go. and then the eunuchs come back to the king, Xerxes, and they say, Vashti said no. And now the king, you could just see the king and the steam rising and the sweat on his forehead and the red face. I think these guys are probably like, I'd have been very quiet if I was in the king's presence when that note comes back from Vashti. And those highest, and then verse 15, what shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law? This is the king speaking. Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs. And how would you say this guy's name? Memucan or Memucan? He's a big old Mamook. Memucan. Is that a drink at Starbucks? I'll take a Venti Memucan, please. Memucan answered before the king and the princes. Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the province of King Ahasuerus. Okay, these guys really are soused, aren't they? And they're laying it on thick and magnifying it, yes. And I think they want to be on the king's side on this. What do you think? Because the king's so mad. Oh, king, ain't no big deal. That'd be the last thing you ever said, wouldn't it? Yeah, she's really something, king. Yeah, let's get her, She's doing not only bad, she did 3 bad things, one commentator said. First of all, she said no to a man. Next, she said no to the man in the presence of his closest friends. And third, she said no to a man who was a king. So remember that, honey, when we get home. No, I'm just kidding. I was just kidding. That's just a joke. Oh, gosh. So they're really laying it on thick. It's like, yeah, king, why wouldn't your wife, want to come and show herself off to, parade herself before us. Verse 17, for the queen's behavior will become known to all women. Boy, they like that word. This guy likes the word all, didn't he? Mamukan. To all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report. King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. It's like, wait till this gets out. Wait till everybody finds out. Our whole society is going to crumble right before our eyes. We've lost control. It's all downhill from here, I'm telling you, King. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus, there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him. Now, let me tell you something about royal decrees and the Persian kings. When a Persian king made a royal decree, it could not be changed. Right. Not even by that king could it rechange it. So it's like they're taking it to the Supreme Court, and let's make a ruling, and let's send something out, not just to Shushan, and not just to Persia, and not just to Media, but all the 127 provinces, all the way down to Ethiopia. Let's make this command thing here. A royal decree to go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before the King Ahasuerus. This is a law. This is like changing the Constitution. This is an amendment to the Constitution of the Persians. Vashti is out. And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. We need a new law, and here it is. Verse 20. When the king's decree which he will make is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. Okay, ladies, if you read this law, what would you think? Yeah, it just makes you want to cozy right up to your husband, doesn't it? Listen, I've realized that there is a law that I can bring down on my wife in order to control her, and I'm going to share it with all you guys. Let me just hang on a second here. The law that I use to control my wife is the law of love. How'd I do, honey? All right, I don't have to sleep on the couch tonight. We're good. And the reply pleased the king. He's like, hey, that's a good idea. And the princes and the king did according to the word of Mamukan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces. Is this like crazy? Does this show you how silly it is to get drunk and make decisions here? To each province in its own script. All right, so imagine this. They make this decree, and then they have to get a bunch of guys to translate it into all the languages of the territory that he covers. And then they've got to make these decrees with the royal seal on it. And now they have to set up a system of delivery. They have to call FedEx. They have to call FedEx, and they have to deliver these each to the provinces. Now, what's interesting about the Persians, among many of the great things that they did or assimilated from other cultures, was the Persians had the first really well-defined postal service. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But the Persians had a post office stable of horses set up every 14 miles along their major routes. So it was just like the Pony Express that we used back in the West. And they jump on those horses and they'd ride them for those 14 miles. Then they'd get off and they'd get another horse and off they'd go. All this set in motion because of that. To every people in their own language, that each man should be the master of his own house. Yeah. And speak in the language of his own people. All right, this comes from a bunch of drunken men, you know. So you look at that and you think to yourself, where is God in all of this? Does it look? It feels in a certain sense disconnected from what we just went through with Nehemiah, doesn't it? You know? I mean, it was so clear, the dark and the light and the battle that was going on and how Nehemiah responded and all that good. To this, it's like, what is this about? See, the Lord is going to use each one of these things in a major way to save God's people. And it ends up in this feast that the Jews celebrate every year called Purim. And that's where they celebrate Esther and Mordecai and what they did and how the people got saved. Now, it wasn't, although it's a feast that's celebrated every year, it's not a Jewish feast like, it wasn't set up by Moses. This is a good 1,000 years later. But it's such a historical event for them that it ends up to be celebrated every year, and it's really something very, very special to them. As you can imagine, they really felt like they were going to be totally wiped out because it was a decree is going to go out a little bit later to wipe out every Jew in every province, and that would include the Promised Land. Yeah, right. It was going to be like a Holocaust. So as we go through this, if you can begin to develop spiritual eyes to see that God is moving behind every detail, then the things that happen to you in your lives every day can become far more exciting.